Good morning or good afternoon, depending where you are. I'm Anna Robert. I work for the last 8 years with the International Committee of the Red Cross. I'm now the Regional Water and Habitat Advisor for the Near and the Middle East. Well, I live in Jordan, and the region where I work is particularly vulnerable to climate change impact. In the Near and the Middle East, land degradation, deforestation, loss of biodiversity, habitat fragmentation, pollution, water, land, air, are strongly interlinked with climate stresses and shocks. We experience heat waves, drought, flood, sea level rise, the temperature are increasing, and are expected to increase until the end of the century, up to even an average of 1.5 to 4.8 Celsius according to the scenarios, while precipitation trends are largely decreasing. Therefore, environmental degradation and climate shocks overlap, interact with armed conflict and other situations of violence with different impacts. So let me give you a couple of examples on how the ICRC could support a conflict-affected community in adapting to climate change. And let's zoom into Yemen, a country that even before the conflict, which started in 2015, was one of the less developed in the region. If Yemen were 100 people, 80 need aids to survive, 66 have almost nothing to eat, 64 have no access to health care, 58 are without clean water, 11 are severely malnourished, but Yemen is not 100 people, it's 30.5 million people. Overall, water has been playing a key role during the conflict, since water infrastructures have been damaged, misused, or targeted. Meanwhile, some of the capable staff essential to run the services have fled. With very limited amount of fresh water, increasingly depleted aquifer, little treatment of wastewater, water supply services and irrigation system weakened by years of conflict, the population has been facing serious challenges in accessing water and consequently on health issues and economic development, employment, food security, and peace. Yemen is considered one of the most water-scarce countries in the world. Currently, 90% of water is used by the agriculture sector. Agriculture uses mainly traditional technique. 45% of all cultivated land is rain-fed and 55% is irrigated, with groundwater or with spade irrigation, meaning the use of surface water from seasonal flood. Moreover, in the last years, Yemen has suffered casualty and damage because of flash flood in different parts of the country. So let's further zoom in to Wadi Felha, a citron river in the north, not far from Saudi Arabia. Rain and Handak well are the source of irrigation there. Farmers make terraces with dry stone walls for the spade irrigation, but they reckon that floods are becoming more violent. One of them has inundated the field with sand and has destroyed the retaining wall. While annual rehabilitation of the wall is quite usual, destruction is an important problem for the farmers who lack financial capacity to clean and rebuild the retaining wall. Moreover, they lack technical knowledge to build walls in a way which is different from the dry stone walls. The ICRC supported the community on reactivating the farming activity, cleaning the lands and building flood-resistant gabion walls to rehabilitate the terrace holding the farmland. The activities were completely made by the community, supported by the ICRC with cash, material like the gabion mesh, and capacity building. In fact, gabions was a new technology supported by the Ministry of Irrigation, but was not common in the north of Yemen. Gabion walls are stronger and easier to build than the traditional dry stone walls, usually made with the big stones. Now, After the case of the community of Jarrah Allah, let's move to the Gaza Strip in the occupied Palestinian territory. Gaza is one of the most densely populated places in the world. In 365 square meters, there are almost 2 million people, with a density of 5,000 people per square meter. Here, water is a contested and scarce good. The over-extraction of groundwater, the long dry spell, and the seawater intrusion cause the increase of salinity in the aquifer. But groundwater is the only source of irrigation in Gaza Strip and is more and more utilized as insufficient precipitation does not allow for a fed system. Climate is changing and the temperature is reportedly increasing and precipitation decreasing. The consequence from the decrease of water supply due to less rain and increase of its demand due to a higher temperature, but also to the increase of agropests, more insects and weeds because of the higher temperature. Moreover, higher temperature decrease the pollination and shorten the production period. The NCRC response has been along 3 lines. The first was the construction of irrigation ponds to harvest rain from the roof of the greenhouses, so that water could be used during the dry period and mixed with the salty groundwater, widening the variety of crop, for example soil-sensitive crops, and saving from 30 to 50% of irrigation water. The second intervention was the distribution of ecological insect traps, which decrease the needs of pesticides, which can contaminate soil, water, and other vegetation, like non-targeted plant, as well as animal, birds, fish. Moreover, pesticides like fumigants contribute to greenhouse gases and therefore to climate change. Two kinds of trap were distributed. One is developed by Biofeed, an Israeli company. On the top of the trap, there is a place for a plastic bottle. In the bottle, there are two substances mixed, one that attracts Mediterranean flies and the other is poisoning. So every day, a few drops goes down and are distributed in the yellow textile and coated in the red sponge. The fly goes to the sponge, they eat the substance and fall in the ground. But only that fly is affected. So there is there is control of biodiversity, doesn't spread further. Bottles have to be periodically changed. The other is developed by Serra-Trap, a Spanish company. It's formed by a bottle with a mix of sugar and yeast, attract insect which are attract and die inside the bottle. In this case, the amount of agropests could be monitored. The substance could also be produced locally. The third intervention was the establishment of a seed bank to encourage the use of local seed, which can improve access to locally adapted crops and variety. It also enhances related indigenous knowledge and skills in plant management, including seed selection, treatment, storage, multiplication, and distribution. The bank includes drought-tolerant seeds. Local seeds could have less yield, but they are better adapted to the climate change, for example, to drought and increased pests. Unfortunately, the majority of the cultivated vegetables are called hybrid, and farmers are losing more and more local seeds. The seed bank was an initiative from a group of senior farmers and was supported by ICRC to protect the local seeds. The small bank has now a variety of more than 40 grains and vegetable crops. Thank you for the attention.